Hi everyone, thanks for popping in again. This is episode 4 of our series, The Human Condition. I thought that today we would look a little bit more into the difference between a person being identified with their ego mind mostly, and then a person that is not so much identified with their ego mind, but more sort of open to other dimensions. And for those of you who haven't seen the first 3 episodes, I would really like to advise you to go see those, because they pretty much laid the foundation for what we're going to be talking about today. Okay, so let me just pick up my pen here and let's try and explore this together. I have to admit that anytime I come on, there's no plan, so I'm kind of ripping this as I go along, and I'm hoping to get things across so that they're clear. I'm gonna try not to think too much about it, because I think that's the way to go. So anyway, so there's these 2 people, and basically both of them are equipped with the same capacity to exist in multiple dimensions, so to speak. And by that we mean to not only experience space, that is the 3 spatial dimensions we covered, and time, which we said can be experienced either in the present or somewheres in the future or in the past. But we said that human beings apparently have, by way of having a brain, mostly, it seems that they do have the possibility to access a sort of a way of being that is very fundamental to everything. So and we coined that the quantum field, I think, or it's part of quantum field theory, that there's this very underlying sort of all pervasive layer of beingness that is also being thought of being conscious, so that anything that can exist comes from that unified field. And if you somehow attribute it to a kind of religion, then you might realize that, well, it seems to be very close to all kinds of religious concepts, because at the end of the day, all religions seem to imply that there's something or some sort of source that all sentient beings come from, and also probably go back to at the end of their very limited lives on this planet. And never mind there being an afterlife or not, it's sort of clear to all the religions that there is some sort of I guess some sort of layer that is sort of all pervasive and not from this level of reality, but somewhere else or something else. And I think the difference to the religious way of looking at things is that we suggested in our earlier episodes that the whole point of our doing this here is to show that, well, any religion or any religion is being thought of as something other than self, or other than the I or the me, and that in itself poses a problem, I think. And I think it's much more beneficial to leave sort of all this let's say, and I don't mean to be derogatory, but leave that religious and spiritual baggage behind for once, and just try to look at this more in a scientific, probably in a more scientific way, so that we can come to conclusions that are helpful. And I think that there's basically, this is really I'm going to juxtapose these two people very crassly now, just to make myself clear. So on the one hand, you have the possibility to really identify with whatever you compose as your I or yourself, and that, we said, has a lot to do with what you've experienced in the past or what you anticipate for that I in the future. Whereas if you're in the now, if you're in the moment, that concept, because at the end of the day it seems to be nothing more than a concept, seems not to matter that much anymore. In the now, or in T0, a person who is not identified with that concept, we said, is actually able to access all kinds of other layers of experience, if you will, and I would hypothesize that none of us know today at this point what these layers are composed of, and whether they're spatial or not, or whether they're in or outside of time. We can only hypothesize, and science does. There's a bunch of links in the video description box of episode 3 that I posted, in which neuroscientists and quantum physicists try to approach and approximate these questions. So anyhow, if we said the space that we mostly experience when we're identified with the I or the self is 4D, i.e. 3 spatial dimensions plus a time dimension, then there seems to be more dimensions, and that is being postulated by science, clearly. I mean, there's string theory, there's M theory, and all these quite elusive theories, but nevertheless they propose that there's anywhere between 11 or 26 dimensions. And of course, I would say none of us can actually imagine what that's like. But just to take the next possible layer that we supposedly are able to experience, I would propose that is a layer that is transpersonal, i.e. that is that is sort of above the concept of I, or doesn't, or sort of beyond, let's say, beyond the concept of I. So a person who is in the now, who does not primarily and in that very moment identify with this concept of I-ness or me-ness or self, is able to pierce through to other layers of existence, if you will. And of course, it's really hard to prove that, because it's bound to personal experience. So, and I'm aware that if there's anyone, claiming that they can access all these other kinds of dimensions of experience, then that is bound to remain anecdotal, because it's always tied to that individual experience of that person in that particular body, or at least it seems to be. So the only thing that such a person could probably do is talk about what it's like to have these experiences, and there seems to be, and there seems to have been all over history, anecdotes such as that. And at one point I talked about the allegory of the cave, written by Plato, and that seemed to sort of, allude to a similar concept. So we can safely say that throughout time, throughout the history of humanity, there's always been individuals that must have had access to that sort of experience in order to be able to talk about it. And not only that, I think that the importance of human beings actually being able to access these dimensions is that if you want to innovate, that is, if you want to create really like new concepts and new ideas that do not stem from that rather narrow corridor of what we're able to experience physically in that sort of very material world, then you'd think that it makes sense for those ideas to come from somewhere else. And I'm not suggesting that they come from any other person up in the sky that we would call God or angel or whatnot, because I'm personally convinced that the idea of individual consciousness bound to a physical body and bound to a concept of self tends to dilute more and more if you go up these levels, so to speak. So I'm not sure if even in 5D there's still a concept of self. I highly doubt it, because I'm convinced that in order to access these, you already must have experienced something like which we called ego death. And that really means to have actually experienced and not only thought of, but actually having experienced the feeling, what it feels like when you don't have that I or when you don't have that self to sort of hold on to. And it doesn't make any sense to think, I mean, at least to me, it doesn't make any sense to think that, well, if you sort of move up the ladder, so to speak, and you start experiencing these more expansive states of consciousness, that you'd still be bound to either a body or an energetic sort of form of same body, for that matter. Which brings us back to quantum field theory and the prospect that there seems to be not only a proto-consciousness, an all-pervading proto-consciousness, like throughout all these possible dimensions, but also sort of like an innate intelligence. And maybe we need to talk about that in a separate video, the difference between intelligence and knowing, because that seems to be a very important distinction. Now, I'm not claiming that I'm able to access these other dimensions. I'm just saying that as an autistic person, I less and less identify with this I or ego consciousness, because it doesn't make sense to me, and it never has, and I've never been given, let's say, because I do have this condition, somehow I don't ever seem to have paid too much attention to this concept, because I'm so busy actually computing impressions and experiences that I hardly have time to think about this person, and it just simply isn't that interesting to me. I rather explore, fringe things, and I would be the person that would want to be that person that pierces through all these dimensions and actually just travels there and sees what's out there and really experiences that, because I feel anything that is connected with ego, I, or self, or this very narrow corridor of experience is just plain and simple boring. At least that's how I think about it. Which brings me to the last bit of this video, in which I would like to offer you some maybe juxtapositions of what 4D versus 5D could feel like. And I'm gonna take my notebook here real quick, never mind the drawing. It's my sketchbook, so I'm mixing drawings with all kinds of thoughts and all kinds of stuff. But so I came up with this list the other day, and I was really thinking about, well, like simple concepts and how those could be juxtaposed in a ego-minded state versus a not ego-minded state. And those are just examples, you know. And I think that when someone is really if someone does not have access to this vast sort of field of also intelligence, because you have to you have to understand that all this is always available to you at all times, and it's flowing through you. The only thing you have to do is let go of that, of your attachment to this concept of self or I or ego, and not give that so much importance anymore, but to really start to open up and just allow things to flow through you, you know. And anything's connected to that. Creativity, ideas, you know, inspiration, knowledge. You can draw anything from out of that field. And if you do, you start experiencing that it's not so much about becoming anymore, you know. It's not like you're this limited and cut off from everyone else kind of person that has to become someone or become something. Rather, you just are, and you can celebrate that just being, you know. Or you don't look to aspire so much anymore, you know, because you don't have that sense of I-ness and self-importance that needs to make itself even more important with time. You go from aspiring to things to simply discovering, you know. You start to discover things, and you find that really just in itself rewarding, you know. And learning, which in 4D terms we also liken to, you know, acquiring knowledge. That means like little blocks of knowledge that we sort of have to grab and keep. Learning becomes more of a receiving, or of opening up and receiving information. When before you felt a sense of lack, or mostly a sense of low self-esteem, you know, because you identified with this very limited person, you know, that's cut off from everyone else. You then in 5D you start experiencing a state of abundance where whatever you have or whatever is given to you in that very moment, and whatever is around you in that very moment, is just okay. It's enough, you know. It's almost like anything you need is inside of you. I mean, of course you have to eat, of course you have to have clothes, and it's beneficial if you have a roof over your head. It's good if you have a job and all that kind of stuff. But I'm saying that, or I'm suggesting that when you're, no matter what your situation is, when you're in that kind of consciousness, whatever you experience tends to be enough for you. It's you stop striving for more and more and more to sort of fill a void that's never been there, because you just want to experience that flow. Yeah, so there's a bunch of other things that I wrote down. And the list, of course, is not, is never final or never complete. Here, that's not, I meant to write racing after or chasing after, or then I replaced it with achievement. And the contrast to that will be just to rest, like not always be running after something, but just to rest. Resting is okay too, because even when you rest, or especially when you rest, that space seems to open up to you, and you can then allow things to come in. Yeah. Anyway, so I hope this wasn't too chaotic. And so let's see what. Now you probably start to realize why I'm never that well prepared, because I'm actually myself trying to allow for things to just sort of come in and flow through me, as opposed to planning things out and having a script and all that. And I hope that's okay for you guys. I'll see you in my next episode, and take good care of yourselves. Bye bye.